We all have our reasons why we're here at this workshop, stories we're carrying with us from the COVID-19 pandemic. I don't exactly remember when I first heard about the virus in 2019, but I know when I first gave it more than a passing thought, in January 2020, as my grandmother Betty lay dying. The nurses said she had the flu, but that it looked different, worse somehow. Maybe she had this new thing, I thought. I dismissed the idea. How would a virus halfway around the world get over here? Well, whether it was the new thing or not, it was Betty's time. A month later, we were at her memorial. There were murmurs about the virus, vague feelings of trepidation. Should we be getting ready for something, I thought? The crisis engulfing China, arriving here, it was still an idea beyond belief. A month later, I was watching the governor's press conference with my few coworkers left in the building. It was here. Within the hour, we were working from home indefinitely. Cases climbed, doom scrolling, Zoom fatigue, stress, fear, and isolation became our parallel afflictions. I prayed for my loved one's protection. 3 months later, in June 2020, the virus killed my friend, Marnie. She'd been in the hospital for months, fighting it as she recovered from surgery. She was 31. I grieved alone, crying in my car. I kept praying. Finally, a year later, I began to see the kids that lived in our apartment building again. After school one day, there they were, suddenly on the lawn, having a water balloon fight. I couldn't remember the last time I'd heard such laughter, filling the air, echoing down the street. Soon the rest of us tenants found ourselves out on our stoops, laughing right along with them. Since then, we've all been outside more, laughing more. I think that's when the healing began for me, which, as healing usually is a 2 steps forward, 1 steps back kind of process. And so now, 2.5 years on, I'm still praying. I dedicate my participation in this workshop to Marnie, to Betty, and to those kids, and to many other people. I hope you dedicate your participation to your own loved ones, whether they still live with us or now live beyond. We've all lost someone or something in these last 2.5 years. We've lost presence with family, friends, community, and important events, including proper goodbyes. We've lost childhood joy, teenage romanticism, the vitality that should come with being in adulthood, and the deep belonging that should come with elderhood. Maybe we've even lost some sanity, faith, or hope, a sense of purpose or meaning. And maybe we've gained some things too. A little more time or closeness to home, new hobbies, interests, dreams, more motivation to heal what's sick and fix what's broken in our world. Perspective on what really matters. I know for myself, the pandemic held these opportunities for growth alongside the grief. I joined the Great Resignation so I could develop this workshop, among other ventures. The question now is, what do we do with all this new grief and growth? Do we simply shrug and carry on, dragging the unabsorbed weight of it all behind us into an unknown future? Or do we acknowledge what we've been through and what lies ahead? Do we give it the sacred space to be felt and sorted and digested? Do we give it the chance to change us, to carry us forward? I believe that in order to transition out of the pandemic, we need to honor our experience of it. There are a few caveats here. Just like the flu, COVID-19 may never technically medically be over, but the pandemic era, as we've known it, this 2.5-year period dominated by the coronavirus, is at least winding down. That is, at least for us in the high-income world. We still have a duty to aid other nations and communities outside our own in making it to recovery and post-pandemic life. And We've all experienced a lot of domestic and international upheavals during this time that we might associate with this era. And not to mention, there's going to be an ongoing aftermath of COVID itself, and we'll be dealing with that. But none of these facts diminish the truth that here and now, in our corner of the world, we need to give this time the respect it deserves. As we do with other natural disasters, we need to declare the period of acute catastrophe to be over. Only then can we begin comprehensive and mutual recovery, and we must. These last 2.5 years, we've been in a state not dissimilar to war in some ways, with the virus and each other. We need to officially declare peace and begin rebuilding in earnest. And with all the restrictions we've had to deal with, it's like we've also been in a kind of confinement. We need to step into embracing our new freedom and all the rights and responsibilities that entails. On this last point, some people are already speculating that in the best case scenario, we may be in for a new post-pandemic roaring 2020s, like the roaring 1920s, a few years of compensatory partying. Let's not forget, though, that the roaring 1920s also coincided with what's called the lost generation. Millions of people stranded in grief and rootlessness after the traumas of World War I, the influenza pandemic of that day, and economic turmoil, all of which left people susceptible to the lure of fascism growing in that day. This is a cautionary tale. We might now want to simply wash our hands of the pandemic era, exhausted by the idea of belaboring the subject another day longer.
But like with any other health issue, if we don't tend to it properly from the onset, it will only fester. If we don't do the upfront hard work of processing what's happened,
we're at risk of sliding into drawn-out depression, animosity, and escapism. We cannot afford this, especially given the work we still have ahead, standing with the rest of the world still under threat, facing the rest of our many 21st century predicaments, and alleviating COVID's ongoing legacy. And to reemphasize an earlier point, we're all likely to buckle under the weight of all these tasks, unless we release some of the weight of the immediate crisis still dragging us down. We can mitigate ongoing trauma for ourselves by creating a sacred context for us to get to process our pain and set our sights on new horizons. This is the ancient wisdom of funerals, memorials, and mourning periods. It's also the ancient wisdom of rites of passage, which mark the transition from one season of life to another, and it can help us here and now. Whether we're in a pandemic or not, this grief and growth experience is messy. It follows no rules or order and loops back on itself as new iterations of reckoning and reconciliation arise. Still, we can recognize a few distinct touchstones we encounter, maybe many times, on the winding journey. At the very least, there's shock as we face our new reality, and the need to have the situation validated by others. There's anger or conflictedness, and the need to express these. There's sorrow, the need to express that. And there's the need for hope and gratitude for what we've learned, and for what's supporting us as we move forward. Those 4 themes frame the 4 sessions of this workshop. Session 1, holding our stories and ending isolation. Session 2, holding tension and blessing the mess. Session 3, holding vigil and honoring our grief. Session 4, holding hope and renewal resolutions. The sequence of the sessions aligns with the format of similar ceremonial contexts, like memorials and rites of passage. These are intended to help us complete the motion or the cycle, so to speak, so our bodies, hearts, minds, and souls can exit overwhelm and enter a more settled, contemplative state. It can help us move from lingering trauma into healing. None of this talk of healing means there won't be confrontation with pain in this workshop. There will be. True healing requires that we feel and express and be witnessed in our emotions. And so one goal of this workshop is to create a sacred context where that can happen. This does have limits, however. In the wake of the pandemic, the weight of grief that each individual feels might be greater than what one workshop can hold. And so the other twin goal here is to equip you with resources to keep working with pain and transformation going forward. In other words, this is not a place for throwing open the floodgates. This is a place for simply letting the waters of grief start to seep into the cracks in our hearts, easing the pressure at a pace that allows for reflection, and setting the stage for an ongoing process of release. It's not an end-all be-all, it's just a conversation starter and a catalyst. And so, outside of this workshop, I hope we can all continue working to heal the world at home and abroad. I hope we can use our stories, our anger, our grief, and our hope in ongoing solidarity with those with fewer resources, so they too can begin the road to recovery. Again, I thank you for joining me in this work. I keep praying. I hope you do too. Beyond protection, now also for peace.